So it'll be paused for a while. I put the title in and it'll start the stream. So, oh, I'm already recording. Okay, so we'll go live. So it's Derek Slater, right?
Daniel Salter is my grandfather.
No, I know, but what's your full name?
You can just call me Derek for now. I'll just go by Derek.
Shall we refer to your grandfather as Daniel Morris?
Actually, Daniel Salter, but so the middle name Morris. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That always confused me.
I guess that was kind of why. Is it work? Are we live now?
Nope. Hold on.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'll just go by Derek if that's okay.
All right. Important voices of disclosure you may not have heard. Is that all right?
Perfect.
All right, go live. Here we go. Hey everybody, it's Laura Eisenhower. I'm joined today by my great friend Dan Willis and another wonderful friend Derek. And this is what's really cool about this broadcast. Derek's related to somebody that had quite a voice in the disclosure community, and we're dealing with an anniversary here, 20 years since the press club, and Dan will get into it all, but Dan's familiar with who your grandfather is, and your grandfather wrote a book, and there's a lot of very, very important disclosures that he was bringing forward that we want to just put some attention on today and see what dots might connect. And before we jump into that, if both of you just want to share a few words about yourself, a little bit about your background, and maybe what you feel is important that you want to bring to the table today, or what kind of intention you're holding for this broadcast.
Do you want to go first, Derek?
I'll let you go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I was one of the 20 witnesses. We were backed by over 500 witnesses that 20 years ago, May 9, 2001, we went before the mainstream media of the world. 22 cameras, largest event in the national history of the National History Press Club. My testimony was a small fragment of the whole picture that's being disclosed. I was in naval communications receiving reports of, at the time I believed being extraterrestrial, glowing discs about 70 feet in diameter, shooting out of the ocean, going 7,000 miles per hour. This is back in 1969. The other witnesses talked about proof of our legal government being denied access, illegal unacknowledged special access programs taking in trillions, zero-point energy solutions been suppressed that eliminate the need for nuclear oil and coal. We had anti-gravity craft that was built back in the 1950s that can go faster than the speed of light. Base that exists on the far side of the moon. Astronauts are sworn to secrecy what happened on the moon. NASA's airbrushing the UFOs out. 57 different extraterrestrial species had been categorized by 1989. That was Clifford Stone's testimony. ET craft have shut down the nuclear ICBM bases. They planned future false flag events by Werner von Braun, which coincidentally the next one was going to be a terrorist event. This was May 9, 2001, 4 months before the 9/11 event, with the future events being rogue nations, which we've experienced that. The next one and online is asteroids, and the final one being an alien threat. And a whole lot more was disclosed. This event was essentially sanitized by the mainstream media of the world to make it sound like we want to have a congressional hearing on just the reality of UFOs. So that was my participation. And Derek?
Thank you, Dan. Yeah, let me just briefly go over I guess where I fit in this. And it's really my grandfather who is the one that is well known or maybe not so well known within the community, but he did write a book called Life with the Cosmos Clearance. So he had claimed he had a security level clearance, 38 levels above top secret. And I mean, it just started back in 1949, 1950 in the Air Force, and went on from there. I mean, there's so much within the book that he really shared that it was hard to believe. And for me, it was, and the family, it was very hard to believe because he wouldn't talk about it through most of his, life and after retirement from the military. I mean, he would always have an interest in UFOs and talk about the subject and kind of make off the wall comments. I think more to my mom and my dad heard it more than I did as a child. But so we never really had confirmation or validation of anything that he knew. And I didn't even know that he was a part of the Disclosure Project and going there in DC in 2001 until afterwards, until the event occurred. I just knew my mom said, hey, your grandfather's coming to the house in Virginia. He'll be here for a few days and he's going to go up to DC. I have to take him for a weekend in DC for some event. That's all I heard. So you can imagine what kind of surprise it was for me to know later on all the information that he was coming out with and what his part was within that Disclosure Project. And so really I'm a mechanical engineer. I kind of took on the footsteps. My dad's an engineer, my brother's an engineer. So I went kind of down that normal path, normal academia and normal career. I almost went to the Air Force because my grandfather, I had his influence and I pushed to become a cadet, and I was the alternate for Virginia to go to the Air Force Academy. But since I did not do that, I just went the normal route. In a way, I think that was a good choice because 9/11 occurred that year, my freshman year of college. But there's so much that he does share, and I hope to get more answers from you, Dan, for knowing, at least speaking with him, knowing a little bit more and being a part, just being a part really from the beginning there. There's a lot that we could obviously talk about from his topics, and it ties in so much of what's happening right now. Like you said, the fact that what Braun was talking about, his message that the final card they're going to try to play is this alien card, and we're getting close to those final stages. You can see it in the news now with the disclosure out, which if anyone, I mean, I really hope that nobody thinks they're going to give us the full story, because it is not, it's not panning out to be that way whatsoever. So I'm sure we can talk more about that, but I think that's the biggest message that needs to be said right now. 20 years later, we're still in the same situation where we don't know the truth. We're not being told the truth. And it has to do more than the fact that we're alone, but what are those other consequences of that? Meaning, like you were saying, 0 point energy, all these other advancements that we could have in the right hands and with the right people in power that know what's happening. And I don't think we're getting that without that clear understanding and message from those in the know. I think we're in big trouble. So, yeah.
Absolutely. I can't emphasize enough what you just said. It's so important that people question any kind of narrative that comes out about disclosure, that there is tagged with it an agenda. I've been doing a lot of research just recently, looking at individuals and organizations and their associations and what they seem to be tied in with, which appears to be connected with agendas. This may not be the appropriate place to go into all that, but I would say, there's a Senate hearing coming up next month in June regarding UFOs and UAPs, as they call them. There is a certain narrative that they've been putting out. There's a certain group that comes out, through the New York Times, and my focus has been the control of our perceptions through the mainstream media that's been infiltrated, that's been being used against our citizens for a nefarious agenda that's hidden. In fact, it's why it didn't go, why it wasn't a world-changing event, what we were disclosing. We had the scientists willing to come forth to prove before an open congressional hearing, put it on the table, show that it works. We have the 0-point energy for like over 70 years. We've had it available. Your grandfather probably had one of the highest of all these witnesses, the highest security clearance. I had a high-level top secret clearance, but he had a cosmic level, which is several levels above. It's a whole different area. I remember parts of his testimony. I remember hanging out with him, before we all went to to do the National Press Club, and he was pretty nervous. All of us were kind of nervous to go before. It was 22 cameras in the back row, largest event in the history of the National Press Club. The place was packed, and you got all these cameras looking at you. And each one of us stated that we're willing to testify under oath before the congressional hearing. That's important, because it's a penalty of perjury if you're making up a story or something. Your grandfather, he was going by Daniel Morris at the press conference. He, from my understand, he was part of a kind of like almost like a Men in Black team that he would say that, people would have an experience or something, and there would be a team that would come in and tell them, well, you didn't really see that, if they weren't cooperative, another team would come in, he would say, that would be more threatening. And then he said that, if that didn't work, there would be another team that would come in, or it would put an end to it, whatever. And we know these operations can be ruthless in how they keep the secret. I just couldn't believe after the National Press Club that this was not going to be a world-changing event. I saw what CNN did with it, made it sound like we wanted to have a congressional hearing on the reality of UFOs, with some of the explosive testimonies that I just read. Second, let me turn that off. Sorry about that. As I began to research, I've been researching since my testimony with the military back in 1969. And so kind of off and on through the years and going outside Area 51, meeting with Bob Lazar for the first time with a small group of researchers back in 1993. Back in the early 90s, I got all the CIA files, at least the ones they allowed to be released from the CIA, and I actually published them online. So I've been researching for some years, and then after the press club, I researched for the last 20 years. And actually going back to Laura's great-grandfather, it seems like there's a whole key element that happened during the Eisenhower administration where, as it seems like it's an unpopular truth that isn't brought out enough, that essentially, the Nazi SS basically hoodwinked us and controlled our education, went in, infiltrated into our intelligence community. They completely took over control of the media, Mockingbird, everybody's familiar with that. And the Nazi SS during Eisenhower's administration in 1954, they set up the Bilderberg meetings, which, along with Council of Foreign Relations and the Trilateral, they control the 6 corporations and give the narrative and the talking points for their agenda to move forward. Which, I'm kind of concerned about what's currently going on. That's probably a taboo topic to talk about right now, what the fear that they're pushing and the situations going on. But basically, what happened was after Eisenhower lost control due to a surrender agreement back in 1955 with the Fourth Reich, every president, CIA director, heads of intelligence, it doesn't matter what your security clearance is, they were denied access. There was a long history of that, but it culminated into a meeting at the Pentagon with the head of intelligence for the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Vice Admiral Thomas Wilson, who was actually the meeting that I went with, meeting with Bob Lazar outside of 51, triggered a National Reconnaissance Office security advisory that had a list of unacknowledged special access programs that were reverse engineering these technologies. The corporations were over at S4. And that document somehow Dr. Greer was able to acquire, and he went with astronaut Edgar Mitchell and Commander Will Miller to meet with the admiral at the Pentagon. And he found out these projects did exist. They were hidden within layers within special access programs. They're like layers of an onion. They're able to hide these things. And so he was denied access and furious, and told Dr. Greer, if you can get your people willing to testify under oath and go before the mainstream media, the people, you have my permission. And this is what basically greenlighted the 2001 National Press Club event. And so it was basically going back to Laura's great-grandfather being denied access. When he tried to look into Area 51, they denied him access, and he threatened them to invade with the First Army. That we're gonna rip this thing apart, he said, being the five-star general that he was. So,
but yet he has some sort of ability to put something in place that is a tough one to, prove, except for whistleblower testimony like Randy Kramer, Project Moonshadow, and something connected with benevolent ETs. And I'm just wondering how that corresponds with his meeting with the Nordics and also with Val Thor, because if he did have contact with benevolent beings and put something in place, whether it's fully a legit story as far as some of what Randy Kramer's brought to the table, it's interesting that he was able to have, something that has been working kind of in the background that you've, referred to as connected with the plan. But we don't have to get into that but would you say that that's, I kind of want to pose a question to both of you. What are your thoughts about like quantum access technologies, Project Looking Glass, chronovisors, and ways that they can manipulate humanity through utilizing these things to shake up the timeline, even using time travel technology to maybe plant things or distort things, or, and that's why it's been so hard to defeat them. And it almost seems like every time it feels like we're on our way, there's a next level of sabotage. And I'm like, man, I wake up in the morning sometimes, like they're using the time travel stuff again. And they're like jumping all over the place with these advanced technologies. What are your thoughts on that, or anything coming forward?
Excellent question. Derek, do you have anything on that?
Well, it just rang a bell. I was just looking at that one part of the chapter in my grandfather's book, and he really does talk about the Philadelphia experiment, where that whole aspect of time travel started, where you're manipulating space and time, that fabric, and they did that.
He did. Oh, interesting. I have a little story on the Philadelphia experiment, by the way, but
we should, because what he does mention is that's kind of where it started, but he mentions with his clearance, it was about UFO technology, contacts with extraterrestrial races, but also at that level of clearance, you have something called particleization, and turning basically waves to particles, energy to matter, or vice versa, to be able to materialize, dematerialize objects, or even create objects with your mind. And so that almost starts to not just Philadelphia experiment, but then it gets into Montauk experiment, where they're even young children to have this ability still, while they're that pure, I guess, of being able to have that ability to be put in this chair, use their consciousness to create, manipulate time, and even this portal technology. And then he goes on to blank slate technology, BST technology, and that was something mentioned by one of the top secret organizations is the ACIO, And he was one of very few to mention that. And that's recently been brought up now. And I do think it has to do with the time travel aspect, the 20 year and back programs that have been talked about, the secret space program. I think that all ties together. So
It does.
it's interesting. Yeah.
It does. It does. Yeah. To address what Laura was saying about the time, the meeting I had, I talked about with Lazar, about a dozen researchers or so, and I was sitting in the front row. No recording was allowed whatsoever, and I had my camcorder going the whole time. The 2 hours, he was being hit with all these questions, and one of the things he brought up was about Project Looking Glass. But Lazar's testimony ever since that time, he's been 100% consistent all throughout. And of course, you know, they in compartmented projects, they don't tell you everything. You know, he said, well, they can only they can look at like milliseconds in the past or the future, you know, but you know, nothing more than that. And you know, I worked with IBM's head scientists on projects that validated that you can precipitate energy into matter manifestation with this particular device I was working with, and tune backwards and forwards in the time. You know, and it's kind of interesting that you know, you can't say the 17th letter of the alphabet, but they also mentioned about, you know, looking back to look forward. They mentioned that in military intelligence online posts, you know, that they're using that technology. In regards to the Philadelphia experiment, you know, after the congressional hearing was denied to bring forth these scientists that we had that could prove we had 0-point energy. By the way, in 1996, just before the meeting in the Pentagon, Dr. Greer met with the CIA director, William Kobe, who had a 0-point energy device that he was going to get to Dr. Greer along with $50 million in order to get it out. He was also going to testify about the Israeli Mossad going into infiltrating the CIA, and about child sex trafficking that the CIA was doing. He was found floating face down in the Potomac River a week before he was going to give that. When we tried to get these scientists to go forth and prove that we had these technologies, which the Bush administration denied, I volunteered along with 6 other technical advisors. Everybody had multiple PhDs except for myself. And I traveled around the planet. I spent about 10 years meeting with scientists and inventors, vetting these technologies that were claimed to be over unity. And so I met some very interesting scientists over the years, and one of them, brilliant mind, he had an energy device of about 300 watts. He had 60,000 of them made in Japan. He was thrown in prison, his car's blown up, and received a national security order. National security order comes out of the patent office. It's out of a secret system called Sensitive Application Warning System. Anybody's got like anything that's anti-gravity, free energy, you know, all the paradigm changing technologies, they automatically get issued one of these national security orders that stem all the way back to 1951, the Invention Secrecy Act. Anyway,
isn't it over a certain efficiency if the machine is able to produce over efficiency of a certain percentage, then it's classified, or it's of a national security risk or whatever. So it's
right. Yeah, it says your invention has been deemed to be a detriment to the national security of the United States. Therefore, you cannot share it with anyone. And anybody you've shared this with, we need their names and numbers and, you know, everything like that. Like one inventor, I flew down the Dominican Republic with Professor Loiter, and this Mohawk Indian had this energy device that was putting out 500 watts with less than 1 watt going in. I was going to fly back down to blueprint it out, and we're going to send it out through 5 different carriers in case we get whacked on the way back. And as soon as we got there, he said 2 CIA agents were at his door and says, "This works, you're dead." And so he had disassembled the entire thing, and we had it all recorded that it worked and everything. But anyway, getting back to the story, I'm going off on tangents as I sometimes do. This one scientist back in the 70s, regarding the Philadelphia experiment, in the naval shipyard, he was able to get off of the USS Eldridge one of the Tesla companies, made by Tesla, one of the electromagnetic generators that caused the ship to shift dimensions and, you know, caused the horrible thing that happened to the sailors. It was really battered up, and he was able to work with the Navy and some naval personnel, and they were able to absolutely verify that it was off the USS Eldridge. Anyway, after many years of work on it, this was kind of battered up, you know, in the shipyard, you can imagine, and he was able to get it functioning. And it's a bizarre story. And I actually have the photograph. If you go to the webmatrix.net and go to the 1943 timeline of the Philadelphia experiment, you can see the photo that the secretary took with her Brownie Instamatic camera, that what happened, it got activated and opened up a dimensional portal, and a creature came through the wall and was telepathically communicating to the secretary and says, "What are you people doing? What do you want?" You know, and she took a snap, and you can clearly see it.
Wow.
You know, and the doctor who was working on this, he was in the other room, and he saw the wall was doing like a wavery thing, and he went in and realized what was happening. He proceeded to do more experiments with it, and he had a rat that he had a cage with a 2-inch wood chopping block, and he had a cheese on the other side, and was able to expand the molecular structure of the wood so that the rat was actually able to walk through the 2 inches of wood and get the cheese. And he was able to dissect the rat and found that some of the wood DNA had merged with the rat DNA. So anyway, just
Wow.
And he still has this device, you know, and he says he could miniaturize it much smaller. And I'm still in communication with him. So just kind of a confirmation that the device that they used on the USS Eldridge was replicated and was able to function. So just validating that story.
Wow.
That's
God.
amazing.
So let's kind of like pull it all into present time, because we're in these crazy times, of course. And you've talked about fake alien invasions. I mean, people for a long time have been talking about the blue beam technologies. I mean, what are your guys' perception on what you're seeing in the world today? We talked about World War III being a war on consciousness and not, you know, on the battlegrounds like we've seen in previous wars. Kind of, what are you seeing? I mean, how are you processing everything? And what do you think the next level of, I mean, sort of like a false disclosure that's leading us astray, and then potential of having real disclosure that can maybe reroute some of this, or has some of it gone too far and it's kind of unreachable once you get the, you know what? I don't know. Any perceptions or thoughts about the here and now, and what the possibilities of a fake alien invasion and that kind of thing?
Derek, any particular thoughts before
I mean,
go off on a rant?
Yeah, I'll just quickly say, I guess.
My questions are like a rant. I'm like, I don't ask like simple questions. It's like, anyway,
No,
go ahead.
that's a great question. So you can see, I guess, if people always ask, well, if they're here, why don't they just show themselves? Like, why can't we just have the definitive proof they're here? Well, this is what my grandfather said too, that really hit home. And this was a video that just showed up on the internet a couple of years ago, and I didn't even know it existed or that he said anything, but it was from the 90s, and it really good, about 40 minutes of him just speaking while he was still very coherent. Because I know at the Disclosure Projects, he started to lose his, you know, functioning. I mean, he already had a mini stroke, so that's why you might have seen him very discombobulated and everything else. But when he was still able to speak as he did, and I'd like to hear more about that too after this, but or just the next topic. But what he really said was, I mean, as far as all this great experiment that we're in, we're really the only few that have free will. We live in this part of the universe, or we were given free will, and a lot of other places and beings aren't given that choice. So that is why we don't have that interference, that at least the direct interference that we might. And so if people think we're not getting help somehow by some benevolent beings, then we wouldn't be here if that wasn't the case. I mean, we would all be obliterated like so easily, even by our own means. And I think the biggest threat to us right now is not going to come from out there. It's going to come from us. We are the biggest threat to any of this because we're not mature enough. We're still kids in the sandbox playing around with nuclear weapons. And if we want to see at the big table, at the big boy table, we have to really wake up in our minds and then how we really perceive the world. So if we cannot develop spiritually, we're in for a big disaster. And that comes back to, is this fake alien invasion going to be something that is going to play out? And are we going to let that affect us? Well, I think it's the fact that as long as we're doing this, what we're doing right now, and more of us are seeing that we're being lied to, we're being manipulated on every level, they're not going to fall for that. They're not going to fall for that. And I have hope that this is the case. But it's going to take more of us doing our part. But consciousness is the main key to basically our survival and getting to that next level. So.
Yeah, absolutely great points. That's why Laura does these shows. You know, we've got to awaken the people so we can't be bamboozled anymore. You know, I like that word.
Yes.
You know, it's basically tricked, deceived. There's a whole lot of stuff going on. You know, being an ex-ABC newsman, that's kind of what I am appalled at what the mainstream media is doing to the population. Anyway, what was I going to say? No, I totally forgot what I was going to go.
Oh my gosh, me too. Because I was just about to. Well, I had another kind of question coming in, but if it comes back around, just put your finger up unless you answer this question first. But so we're seeing, you know, all this, you know, kind of rolling out. And it looks pretty freaky. It's hard to know what's real and what's not real as far as, you know, this transhumanism and microchipping and just, you know, all the different, you know, things that they're attempting to do. And I agree. I mean, we're still here, and there's obviously assistance, but I mean, we're on the precipice of really being able to advance ourselves and upgrade. And this is like ultimately like pulling the carpet from underneath us. Do you see kind of a bifurcation? Do you feel that good people and awakened people are at the mercy of those who are asleep and we're screwed if they don't get it? I mean, like, how do you kind of perceive it? Do you sort of see bifurcation? Do you see that we're just kind of all in this mess together and you're just gonna, I don't know, just have to kind of, and it might not be the same for everybody, but what are your thoughts on all that?
I've definitely, you know, what I've been researching a lot, Laura, is like I mentioned earlier, I'm looking at what is going on. As I mentioned, next month in June, they're going to have the Senate hearing, and supposed to be the 180 days is ended, where they share all the UFO, UAP across all 18 intelligence agencies. And it's a perfect time for them to spin or control the narrative toward their agenda. And, you know, they always do. And what I look at is, if you look at the history of how basically the Nazi SS, you know, controlled the media, and it's, you know, you can't say just Nazi SS, it's a cabal of, you know, which fits in with the Chinese, it's all the ideology, the mentalities of this global elitists, the eugenicists, these dictators, you know, Chinese Communist Party, you know, all lump it into one word called the cabal. But, you know, it stems from Nazi Germany, basically, you know, infiltrating in and creating they had this plan called Weltanschauungskrieg to create a matrix of perception, which they did. They rewrote the history of World War II. They took over the media, entertainment industry. And so they created, so we're generationally indoctrinated. Every generation gets to go through the same thing. And so we don't know anything else. So we're in this bubble of a reality that we don't know. I mean, the real truth is so science fiction-like that it keeps its own best secrecy, because you try to explain it to somebody and they think you're, a raving lunatic conspiracy theorist, But, some of my totally speculation on my part, okay. I'm still researching, but there appears to be a lot of connections with the predatory race that's connected with the Nazis and the Vatican, and that there's definitely an agenda going on to control the narrative in such a way that the extraterrestrials look like a threat. And as you know, like, say, for example, the History Channel did the Unidentified series, and you could, about 100 times, they kept saying the word alien threat, even the program, the Advanced Aerial Threat Identification Program out of the Pentagon, and all the people that are connected with that, Luis Elizondo, you have
yes, exactly, Tom DeLonge,
John Podesta,
Yeah.
You got all these different elements. And then you have other people in the UFO community that are saying, no, all the species are benevolent. There isn't any negative ETs, So it almost as though, like, some of the, I was talking to Dr. Sala the other morning, that, some of the secret space program witnesses, which, we got kind of validation because of the UK hacker, Gary McKinnon, revealed the Solar Warden program, and they wanted to put him away for 70 years in prison. So we have some solid evidence that, such a program exists, although the actual witnesses, they can't come up with any, because of the nature of it, the 20 and back program, they can't come up with it. But from what some of the witnesses were saying is that this predatory race, what they would do with a planet, when they reach a certain level of evolution, they would come in with a nasty race that would come in and attack them, and everybody would be freaked out, and then all of a sudden there would be another race that comes in as the saviors. And so I'm just kind of looking at the different elements that are in, and it's rather complicated. It's kind of in depth, but there's definitely elements that are trying to say that we haven't made much progress, which is just kind of interesting. That one of the things we disclosed was, my dear friend Mark McCandish, he was, he said it was a suicide, what happened to him. And
that happened to Mark McCandless from
McCandless,
the disclosure?
yeah, it was a suicide.
Wow.
Just recently.
Oh my God.
And his testimony completely destroys the narrative that we didn't have advanced technologies, because, and even Dr. Stephen Greer at the 2013 citizen hearing, he said, the NSA revealed to him that by October 1954, we had anti-gravity. These craft that were built back in the 1950s could go faster than the speed of light. And so it completely destroys the narrative that we don't have this advanced technology. And then you have Mike Tuber, who was a US Air Force intelligence specialist, that came out and said that the Tic Tac, that, the New York Times, the
Right.
2004 Nimitz incidents that got saturated. When you get green lighted and saturated across all the platforms on the mainstream media, at a high level, it got the go-ahead to promote it, right?
Right.
And so his testimony was that basically that Tic Tac was made at the Palmdale Lockheed facility in California that could go 24,000 miles per hour, and underwater could go over 500 miles per hour. And we have this technology. It was the U.S. Air Force Secret Space Program was working with the Navy's most advanced radar. And all of a sudden, he has completely, and his testimony has been confirmed by, parts of his testimony has been confirmed by 3 naval personnel that confirmed his testimony. Now, all of a sudden, he has come out like somebody came out and gave him an offer he couldn't refuse, sort of thing, and has completely retracted the story and said he made the whole thing up. And
Right.
so you have Mark McClandish saying that we had it in the 1950s. The Tic Tac, which is highly promoted, would be destroyed by these testimonies. So I'm just looking at the suspicious activity that's going on. I can't say anything for sure. I'm just observing and looking at what people are saying and what appears to be indications of an agenda. And that agenda may be that what Werner von Braun's deathbed was, that the final card would be the hoaxed alien invasion, which, they have the technology to pull off. And so, there's so many different elements going on with this whole thing.
Right. And it's
Yes.
obviously this isn't the first, and then I'd love to hear your thoughts on that question, Derek. But obviously this isn't the first time they've attempted this sort of thing. When we look at like the Orion Wars and things that happen on planetary systems like Apex, and the whole kind of genetic modification of a humanoid or a human into a completely different form. It's like, obviously some of these technology exchanges has to do with like mind control or these bioweapons that are using false flag and psychological operations to create the fear in order to deliver this phase of, I guess, the war on consciousness that I feel we can raise the vibration of regardless of the choices people are making. So when I talked about bifurcation, I don't necessarily think that we're all just going to split away. I feel like there's something that we're going to be able to do as a collective to maybe bring some level of enlightenment to the AI, because I think we can turn these weaponized technologies around if our consciousness is clear enough. So I just wanted to add that bit. But what are your thoughts based on what Dan just shared, and anything you want to add to that, Derek? And then, yeah, if you guys have questions for each other, and we'll probably need to close out, but like, we can close out with some final words. But yeah, anything come forward?
Just on, before I forget, I guess. I think, yeah, you hit it home. It should be so obvious the kind of threat that they put out there as far as anything to do with the UFOs or anything that could not be from this planet. Of course, I think there's the good and the bad we have to deal with, but the narrative that they're pushing for right now is pretty scary. And the fact that the technology is so advanced that we could literally, our military, I mean, they have these ships, they can easily just come in, pretend they're some advanced race, start shooting, and then what? We're in a war of all wars, basically. So that could definitely happen, and I think you can see it. And the brainwashing, the mind control, my grandfather talked about that too, and that goes into even our medicine and whatnot. But all of that has been happening for over 100 years. So if we don't think, that's why it's so fantastic, like you said, Laura, and Dan, that the fact that all the things we talk about seem so extraordinary, so completely out there. We must be bonkers. But look,
I wish. Wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah, I wish I was just making all this up, and there wasn't a reason to try to get this information out, because there's so many of us that are still asleep. If you look at evidence, there is ways to do it. I mean, you just have to think for yourself. You have to go and do your own research. That's the only way you're going to come up with the answers. Don't look for anybody else to tell you. Don't look for me to tell you. I had to do this research for the last 20 years to come up. I was the biggest critic of my grandfather. He didn't just blatantly say, hey, here's all this information. This is the way the world works. No, he said, well, if you're interested, go read this book or go look at this movie. There's a lot of truth to that. That's all I got from him. I mean, that's the smart way to handle it, I guess, if you know that much. I mean, you can lead a horse to the water. You can't make them drink. You can't just force feed people all this stuff or spoon feed them what they have to go and look for on their own.
Yeah.
Honestly, that's where we're at right now. And bifurcation, I believe, is is definitely happening. And I think we're going to build communities that are prepared to look at the truth, or at least look at how to improve their lives instead of ways of living in fear and pretty much torture and being blind to all the criminal acts that are taking place just behind the scenes. It's obvious. Who would want to be part of a culture and a civilization like that? There's a lot of us that don't, and we're fed up with it. So I think we will start moving in the right direction. So it'll be exciting. It'll be difficult, I'm sure, as well.
Do you think it's reversible, some of this stuff connected to the?
Yeah, I do. I think so.
Pine needle tea.
Yeah.
Right.
Pine needle tea.
From
Yeah,
what
they
I've heard.
definitely use fear, and they
Yep.
manipulate the information. And you've got to research, see what highly credible scientists and doctors are saying. A lot of independent researchers. Don't follow any particular one person. Research all sources of information, and then come to your own conclusion. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's so important that we exercise our intuition. I almost see it like a muscle, and if we don't, it'll atrophy and it'll get smaller and smaller. And our ability to have our own personal guidance and that sort of like, I feel like intention is putting instructions in like our internal GPS system. And if we have a strong intent, our higher awareness and our intuition will guide us to be able to manifest and create based in that intent. And that to me is more powerful than anything. And that's why they use mind control, because if they can knock us off our center and grab our intent and grab our creative imagination and our creativity and our dreams and visions and distort them into, things that haunt us and cause us fear, and obedience is seeming to be like the answer to it all. We need to daily practice strengthening those parts of ourselves so that we're where we need to be, and we're in alignment with synchronicities and all the things that are related to organic ascension, which is to me human advancement and realizing, all that we truly are. And I had another thought or question, but anything kind of coming through based on that?
It's really quick. Yeah, real quick if you look at science in the last 100 years, if you look at any great mathematician, physicist, anybody that's gone so far into those topics, into the quantum level, or just to the very vast edges of what science, what we can grasp and discover. The more they do that, the more they sound like philosophers or some ancient guru, like spiritual gurus, because they understand that's how the universe truly works. You have to have that part of it, and it's tied to consciousness. And I think in a scientific way, if you look at Nassim Harameyn's work, he's been doing a lot. And that kind of ties in that aspect of things, because that will be the answer. The mind is the most important part. Like, I kind of think of it as, is space going to be the final frontier, or is it going to be our mind? Because at the end of the day, what's the difference on the higher levels of our awareness of how we view the universe, how it works anyway? The universal mind, the one mind. But and that goes back to our ability to change whatever they happen to be doing, even on physical DNA level. We can still change that if we
feel that too.
That we have.
Yeah, if we don't lose the sovereignty of our mind, because the mind directs what manifests. Just like Mercury, the magician, that archetype connected to the mental body is how we shape our reality, the thought forms we hold, the words that we speak, and all the symbolism of the muzzles and is very much, the suppression of truth, because that frequency can alter. And what, like this virus and the whole concept of it, that's creating sort of more reversals and more enslavement, the higher consciousness ability to do the exact same thing, but for the good, so that things spiral in the right direction, is even greater. So that the voice and the truth can activate something similar that the fear virus does. And I feel that that's the greater alchemy. That's why I use the title Global Alchemist, because we can turn the lead into gold. We can create corrections. Once we, understand that we've been like a food source, and I just kind of want to ask you guys this question, because people, when they hear all this, a lot of it goes over their head, and they're like, okay, well, they might be thinking, why are they doing this to us? Wouldn't you say it's like the nature of a parasite is to need a host, wants to harvest loosh, wants to take divine light from innocence because it has lost its direct connect with source. So all it really has left is to prey upon what it doesn't have access to anymore, and manipulate it so that it can actually harvest it. And we're the ones that are losing the organic and true, alignment. That's our birthright to, reclaim. Any kind of thoughts on that, you guys? And then we'll probably have to close. I could talk to you guys for hours, but
they want to use us as the batteries, like in the Matrix, basically. That just came to mind.
Yeah. We've been technologically, spiritually, intellectually hijacked. They spend billions of dollars in engineering our consent. Back in the 50s, major universities took out the powers of human consciousness to affect reality. Why would you do that? This is part of the Nazi plan, to control this matrix of perception, that people, to disempower people, because they knew they can rule people by fear. What's sad is that we, with, exchanges with off-planet cultures, all the, the BS that we were taught in school and education and science, we've got such a limited view where we could have such an expanded view of the true science. And we could be using technologies that work completely in harmony in nature, that don't, create toxic situations. Just across the board, the world could be transformed into a paradise on Earth, but we have these elements that are manipulating our perceptions toward their agenda, which is a relatively small group compared to the rest of humanity on this planet. And until we put the dots together and realize that's going on, we will head down the path that they're trying to guide us on. But there's a lot of us, there's a great awakening happening. A lot of us are piecing together things. And
you only need one candle to light up a room. So I think
right, we're at a crossroads of timelines. We can go off in one timeline, which is pretty dismal and dark, and another one which is completely liberating. And they have technology in the secret space program to reverse age you, cure any disease. We don't have overpopulation problem where there's other places on the planet. There's plenty of room. You can even colonize other planets on this. There's not a population. It's a matter of they want to control and have a small slave force by reducing the population, which they keep on letting us know that they want to do. We are not going to go along with it if we are aware of what their whole playbook is, and we need to see that. And my small message is look at the history of the mainstream media, how it's gained control, and if it isn't obvious by now that they're manipulating your perceptions, do some research. My notes on that is the webmatrix.net. Is a link called Enemy of the People, and it goes through a little short history of even Project Veritas calling out CNN that they're saying, oh yeah, fear sells, and that we use propaganda, and we're going to stop with the thing that starts with the letter C, and and the next big push is going to be climate change. And sure enough, you start hearing in the news that's they're being fed the narrative. All these different outlets, New York Times, Washington Post, CNN, MSN, the whole list of them, hundreds of them. They control them all through the 6 corporations. They are forming. People are brought up trusting what mom and dad used to watch on TV, and there's no reason as you grow up as an adult to not trust what you see on television. That's the problem, is there's so many innocent people unknowingly trusting what they see on TV and not realizing that the information is being manipulated and is being used against the public,
because
the citizens of this planet.
They thought in the history books that we won World War II. The whole concept of Project Paperclip and Mockingbird and all these MK Ultra projects and secret space programs and all the different levels of it. Nobody's aware of. So the weapon of indoctrination, social engineering, and false flags and psychological all those different things, people accept as just regular reality when really they're weaponizing perception. And then of course we've been breathing in nano particles from the skies being sprayed and this and that, which links us even more into some of this stuff, because our devices are linked into, you know, the nano stuff, and because our brain's a computer, is literally changing, you know, the chemistry due to the good intent of people being trusting. But then the slow tactic is divide and conquer. How can they pit us against each other? And I never imagined it would come to this extreme. And even like, I mean, just with the different movements, and now we have to stay away from each other, and there's going to be those that got the jab and those that didn't, and how it's going to be very difficult to occupy the same space. And we have to be brave and say, can we get to a higher level of awareness and not like stay in this kind of fear? And like, anyway, any thoughts, Jarek? And I know we should probably close, but
let me just those are great points. This is one thing I wanted to say. While you mentioned the press, and you mentioned just how we've been tricked our whole lives, our whole history, at least the last 100 years could have been very different, you know, back to where electricity was invented with Tesla. So we could go in that whole subject. But I thought of this book, Behold the Pale Horse, by William Cooper, by Bill Cooper.
I knew William Cooper. Yeah.
So I think, and my grandfather mentions him and says he knew him too, it was some capacity, but he was basically, Bill Cooper in the Navy is what my grandfather was in the Air Force. So he actually speaks up to that fact. And I'd love to know more about what you know from Bill, but I mean, this book's amazing. And I actually went through all the old archives of his radio show and would listen to what he had to say. But the one part about the protocols of the wise men of Zion in this book, there's a section about freedom of press, or basically the word freedom, and how we can use that within the press to manipulate basically anybody to believe what we want them to believe and see what we want them to see. That was written over 200 years ago, when when our Constitution and our country was founded. They had that already written down as, this is our plan, this is how we can do it, with just the press as far as newspapers, as in writing. But, I mean, it sounds like everything happening on TV, and so every aspect of the media, it all ties into that completely. So people think that this is,
they said the same thing, you know, Adam Weishaupt of the Bavarian Illuminati back in
exactly.
You know, got to control the perception. Back then it was the press. And so, you know, the key element is to control the perceptions of the public. You know, Cooper's testimony was a submariner, and similar to mine, you know, huge craft coming out of our oceans, you know. So there's this a lot of stuff going on deep underneath our oceans.
And then Phil Schneider with the deep underground military bases, the DUMBs, and my grandfather said he knew Phil Schneider very well, and they were friends. And I remember as a kid, there was a VHS tape of Phil Schneider talking in the 90s, and I was like, this is interesting, what he's talking about.
And the millions of people that are missing, and we know that Hitler escaped, according to JFK files, and Himmler too, who wanted to have an empire of slaves, and the people are missing. And what's going on deep under all these deep? We know that Nazi Germany under Antarctica, still the corporations are still using slave labor, and off planet as well on Mars, which
exactly,
or almost got sucked into going. You know, so. Yeah, there's so much.
And that is our biggest currency, is human slave labor, basically. And it's still the biggest problem we're going to face for a long time. I mean, if that doesn't become the talking point, you know, it's never going to end. That's kind of the root of all of these problems, but it's coming up a little bit more and more, I guess.
Well, that's why we need to just unite and just strengthen, you know, just this you know, kind of community and these conversations, and do things on a grassroots, you know, level, do things in our local community, and emerge out of where, you know, different plants or disinfo agents have tried to really fragment that potential that we can make sure is not lost to us. And that's why I love having these conversations, and I really appreciate both of you. And any kind of like final things that maybe something that you wanted to bring forward and you weren't able to share, something that's come through, you know, recently that you want to just give some attention to before we close. And everybody, I just want you to know, I will put their links and info in the description. Because it's alive, it's not going to be there right away, but just check back and I'll have all their information. But yeah, any kind of final thoughts? I know I leave it to you guys to decide amongst yourselves, but yeah, go ahead, Derek. It looks like you're about to say something.
No, I was going to say, go ahead. I can leave it short, but I think we really touched on a lot of the main topics I wanted to say. But my journey for myself, my own discovery, it's been a long one. And like I said, it's not for somebody else to tell you what is or isn't truth. You'll find it if you're willing to look for it. But you almost go through this hero's journey, and like I had to go through basically a spiritual awakening through this path, and it even happened after the contact in the desert and meeting you, Laura, and all of my heroes basically that have been in this movement forever after that event. There's so many synchronicities, and that will happen more and more as you try to go through and search for your own truth and listen to your gut, listen to your heart more than just your head. But I went through a whole kind of interesting path, and I think that's, everybody has their own story, but that's how I got my validation and of what's really going on. And it's exciting because this is not over. I think we can turn with as much as the movement's happening, as much dark that comes, we can turn it around very quick. So yeah.
Like Rebecca's home.
Really appreciate you being here, Derek. I'm so glad we made this happen. Go ahead, Dan.
I think I just appreciate all the work you're doing, Laura, and helping to awaken the public. I think it's this threshold you go over that once the thing intuitively is that truth has this ability, I believe, to resonate. And when people start asking questions like you're saying, Derek, it's like, and you start finding the answers, it's going to be one oh my God moment after another when you start really finding out more of the larger, not to say you ever can get the full picture, but you can get enough of the picture if you research long enough. I've spent the last 20 years researching all the documents that are authenticated and witness testimonies and seeing what makes sense, what all collaborates with each other. And that paints a larger picture. And so until you do that, nobody can tell you this. You have to do it. You have to do your own due diligence and find out a crazy security system.
Something was just, kind of coming through that we haven't really talked about. I'm sure we're going to, create more of this, but like breeding programs, it seems that when we look at like the larger picture of the timelines or how certain races or humans who have made certain choices further down the timeline, put these different projects in place to create corrections. Sometimes they're detrimental breeding programs and sometimes not, but that's a huge piece that's going to come in more and more. Even like, the Essassani that's connected to, gray human hybrids. And there's such a larger picture that we might want to dive into next time about, breeding programs and some of these abduction scenarios. But I mean, these kind of conversations could go for hours and hours and hours. So, I'd love to, do more with you guys. Are you kind of up for that?
I would love to. Yes.
Always.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, we're always trying to create corrections. I mean, we're infinite beings. And if we did take a path that digressed us or we're locked in a trauma loop, I mean, the power of spirit is always seeking to repair and correct. Once it starts to just, kind of like realize, wait a second. So we want to catch ourselves before it gets real detrimental, before we lose connection with that intuition. And it's only going to get harder and harder the more we walk down that path of complying without questioning. So,
and don't judge the messenger. That's the biggest thing I could say to people that try to find the answers. Do not judge where the message is coming from. Look at the quality of the message and the content in the message. I mean, that's really what matters. And that especially goes with all the channeling type of aspect to it. Like you said, Laura, and the Essassani and this hybrid type of, this whole other subject we could go on and on about. That's really the new generations are the ones that are going to be very much more telepathic and just have the answers. They're just going to be there. And we can't trust everything, but we'll hear that when we hear the truth. I mean, we'll know the truth when we hear it, basically.
Yes.
We stay connected to our divine center for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Any final thoughts?
Yeah, just my notes to share. I just put up them online. www.thewebmatrix.net is from the year 1900 to present day of my own research, which use it as a reference and validate for yourself. There's reference links on it's chronological. So
Amazing.
yeah, use it to supplement what you do on your own research, and you come to the same astonishing conclusions I've and many others have come to.
Yeah, it's incredible what you've discovered in your research and just your whole journey, being, a former ABC News guy too, and just really appreciate you and all your incredible research. Dan, thank you so much for joining us. What about you, Derek? Where can we find you, and final thoughts, even though I probably asked for your final thoughts a couple times?
No, mine's short.
Gotta let guys go.
There's my grandfather's book. By the way, our family doesn't get anything from this. It goes to some production company. So I've never promoted it in the past, but later.
Can you say the title and your grandfather's name again?
Yeah, Daniel Salter, or Daniel Morris Salter, and it's titled Life with the Cosmos Clearance. But it's on Amazon still, at least for now. But it's more relevant now than it ever has been. And the more as we go on, you're going to start to see those pieces connect a lot. I mean, it's incredible. So I'm still learning more every time I read it.
Oh, awesome. Well, I look forward to more, and just feel very strengthened by this meeting. And I hope you guys got a lot out of it. Some of this is very new to people, and for others, not so much, but just really appreciate people of integrity like yourselves that are just highly intelligent, that have the mind and the heart, the wisdom and the heart and intelligence to help us in these times, kind of deal. Like, I feel like I'm over a big hump of just processing through the heaviness of the emotionality of it all. I'm feeling a little bit better, and I hope everybody's hanging in there. And
what about your event? What do you guys are doing this weekend, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you for reminding us.
I'm excited.
Yeah, we're doing an online conference, and you can register on my website, cosmicgaia.org, and it's called Unveiling Galactic Heritage and Unlimited Human Potential. Dan's one of the speakers. We've got 11 speakers all together, and I'll have that link in the description as well. And you can replay it endlessly, and lots of different perspectives, and we'll be creating more of this kind of thing. And Derek, we'll be doing more as well. And love you guys. Thank you so much for being with me today, and take care, everybody.
Love you too. Thanks, Laura. Thank you.
Bye.